Mr. Men, Little Miss, and the King's Cake. Roger Hargreaves. This year it was Little Miss Splendid's turn to have the honour of hosting her friends for the King's Cake. But there was a small problem. She didn't know how to cook. Above all, Little Miss Splendid was far too important a person to stoop to such insignificant things as cooking. Little Miss Splendid therefore asked Little Miss Bossy to prepare the cake, and she immediately ordered Mr. Mischief to make the cake for her. But she was so authoritarian and so bossy that Mr. Mischief decided to ruin everything by slipping in a special surprise bean, a mousetrap. Fortunately for the success of the party, Mr. Nosey discovered the trap thanks to his usual flair. Snap! Little Miss Splendid then asked Mr. Greedy to prepare a new cake. Mr. Greedy was an expert cook, and he cooked a giant cake. It was as big as a table, possibly bigger. He took some time to admire his work. His cake was so appetizing that Mr. Greedy's mouth was watering, and he wanted to know what it tasted like. "I'm just going to taste a little bit of it," he said to himself, "to make sure it's good." And you can guess what happened next. One little piece called another, and before you could say "Yum!" the cake was swallowed whole. Poor Little Miss Splendid! The party was coming up, and she still didn't have a king's cake. This time she called Mr. Perfect and asked him to prepare a cake. And do you know what? He cooked a perfect cake. Maybe Little Miss Splendid should have asked him first. Mr. Perfect then instructed Mr. Bump to deliver the cake. You can obviously imagine the rest, can't you? Unfortunately, Mr. Bump slipped and fell head first into the cake. Bump! Little Miss Splendid was getting more and more worried. The party was in just a few hours. How was she going to get out of this? But of course, the solution was simple. Call on Mr. Impossible. And that's how a beautiful golden cake was placed on Little Miss Splendid's table, around which all her friends took their places. Little Miss Tiny, who was the smallest of all the friends, settled under the table to distribute the shares. Little Miss Tiny first called Mr. Messy. He ate his share of the cake, putting crumbs all over the place, but he didn't get the bean. Little Miss Tiny then called Little Miss Naughty, who claimed to have the bean, but it was just a prank. Little Miss Tiny called Mr. Rush, who swallowed his share in one mouthful. Everyone hoped that the bean was not in his share, because then it would be impossible for them to check whether he had the bean or not. So, guess who found the bean in their slice of cake? Well, yes, that's right. It was Mr. Perfect. "Who are you going to take for Queen?" Little Miss Splendid asked, hoping, of course, it would be her. "My Queen will be Little Miss Princess," he announced. "But that's unfair!" exclaimed Little Miss Splendid. "Little Miss Princess already has a crown." Thank you for listening.